It's January 5th, the last of the 12 nights of Christmas. Outside your window, the Austrian Alps rise like frozen teeth against a black sky. Snow has been falling for weeks. Not the gentle snow of Christmas cards, but relentless Alpine snow that buries villages and closes passes and cuts communities off from the world. Inside, the fire is dying. You should add more wood, but your attention is elsewhere. Your eyes keep drifting to the corner of the room, to the spinning wheel, to the basket beside it, still half full of unspun flax. You were supposed to finish. The rule was clear. Everyone knew the rule. Your grandmother taught it to your mother taught it to you. All spinning had to be completed by Twelfth Night. Every last fiber transformed into thread, every thread wound onto spindles, the wheel emptied and cleaned before the sacred time ended. This wasn't just tradition, this was law, the oldest law, the kind of law that existed before written codes, before kings, before anyone thought to question why things had to be done a certain way. You finished your spinning by 12th night because that's what you did, because that's what everyone did, because the alternative was unthinkable, and you didn't finish. The excuses pile up in your mind. You were sick for 3 days in December, a fever that left you too weak to work the wheel. The children needed extra care when the cold snap hit. The wool was poor quality this year, tangled and difficult to work with. Your husband was away longer than expected, and you had to handle his chores as well as your own. There simply wasn't enough time. None of that matters now, because you hear footsteps outside, crunching through the snow, slow, deliberate, coming closer. And you know, with the certainty that comes from a lifetime of stories, of warnings, of fear passed down through generations like the thread on your spindle, what's coming to check your work? Something that rewards the diligent with silver coins and punishes the lazy by slitting their bellies open, pulling out their intestines and stuffing them with straw and garbage. The footsteps stop at your door. The latch begins to lift. Her name is Frau Perchta, the lady, the bright one, the hidden one. She has many names in the Alpine regions: Perchte, Berchte, Bertha, all derived from old Germanic words meaning bright or shining. But what she brings is not always light. She's been walking these mountains for over 1,000 years. Before Christianity came to the Alps, before the Romans, before written history, she was here. The spinning goddess, the guardian of the 12 nights, the judge who comes when the year turns over. Describing her is difficult because she has two faces. Sometimes she appears as a beautiful woman dressed in white, radiant, gentle. Her hair flows like spun silver. Her eyes are kind. She moves through the village blessing homes, leaving small gifts, smiling at children. This is the Perchta that good households see, the one you want at your door. Sometimes she appears as something else entirely, an old crone, hideous, bent and twisted by age or malice or something older than either. Her nose is long and hooked. Some say it's made of iron, sharp enough to cut. Her clothes are ragged, stained with things you don't want to identify. She carries a knife, a long knife, and she knows how to use it. The face she shows you depends entirely on what she finds when she inspects your home. Is your spinning done? Is your house clean? Did you eat the proper food on her feast night? Did you show the proper respect? If yes, the beautiful woman, the blessing, the coin. If no, the hag, the knife, the straw. You don't get to choose which Perchta visits. Your actions choose for you. Before we continue, I want to ask you something. If you believe these dark myths, strange histories, and forgotten legends are worth remembering, if you believe that the terrors our ancestors faced should not be lost to comfortable modern ignorance, you can help us continue this work by liking this video and subscribing. Your support keeps the candle lit. It allows us to keep exploring the shadows where history and horror intertwine. Tonight, we travel to the Alpine regions of Austria, Bavaria, and Switzerland, lands where winter lasts half the year and the old gods never fully died, where the mountains trap villagers in isolation for months at a time, where the darkness between Christmas and Epiphany was filled with spirits, processions, and judgment. We'll meet Frau Perchta, the Lady of the Twelfth Night, the Spinner's Judge, the Belly-Slitter. We'll explore her dual nature, the gift giver and the executioner, the beautiful and the terrible, the goddess who became a demon but never stopped being worshipped. We'll trace her origins from pre-Christian deity to Christmas monster, and we'll ask why our ancestors created a figure who inspected their spinning wheels and disemboweled those who hadn't finished their work. We'll meet her wild retinue, the Perchten, masked figures who still parade through Alpine villages today, some beautiful and some terrifying, all of them hers. And we'll discover why, after 1,000 years of Christianity trying to stamp her out, she's still here, still walking, still checking. This is the Christmas spirit you weren't taught about, the one who comes not with gifts, but with a knife, not with joy, but with judgment. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. Let me tell you exactly what Frau Perchta does when she finds a household that hasn't finished its spinning. She doesn't lecture, doesn't warn, doesn't give second chances. The time for working was before Twelfth Night. The time for excuses was never. She cuts you open. Her knife, long, sharp, worn from centuries of use, slices through your abdomen, not quickly, not mercifully. She takes her time. She's done this countless times before, and she'll do it countless times again. There's no rush. The blade parts skin, then muscle, then the membrane that holds your organs in place. She reaches inside, her hands, whether young and beautiful or old and gnarled, are always strong, and she finds your stomach, your intestines, the parts of you that should have been filled with good food, earned through good work. She removes them, and then she fills the empty space with straw, with pebbles, with garbage, the refuse of the household, the scraps that should have been disposed of, the worthless material that you let accumulate instead of doing your work. She stuffs you full of everything you should have transformed, but didn't. The flax that should have become thread. Straw now fills your belly instead. The wool that should have become cloth. Rocks take its place. You had raw materials. You had time. You had the tools and the knowledge and the obligation, and you wasted it all. Now you're filled with waste yourself. She sews you back up. Some versions of the story say she uses an iron needle, massive, crude, designed for leather or canvas rather than human flesh. She drives it through your skin with the same practical efficiency she brings to everything else. Other versions say she uses a plowshare. Think about that. The blade of a plow, the heavy iron implement that breaks earth and turns soil. She threads it like a needle. Somehow, impossibly, because the rules of physics don't apply to beings like her, and she stitches your belly closed with the tool of agriculture. There's symbolism here, whether the original storytellers intended it or not. The plowshare prepares the earth for planting. It's the beginning of the productive cycle, the first step in transforming raw land into food, fiber, survival. Perchta uses it to close the wound she made in you, the person who failed to complete that cycle, who took the raw materials and didn't transform them, who broke the chain of productivity that keeps communities alive. She's finishing what you started, completing the work you left undone. Except, instead of thread and cloth, she's made a corpse stuffed with garbage. That's your legacy now. That's what your laziness produced. The stitches are rough. They'll hold. Perchta's work always holds. But they're not pretty. They're not meant to be. They're meant to be seen, to be found, to serve as a warning to everyone else in the village. This is what happens when you don't finish your spinning. It wasn't just lazy spinners who had to fear Perchta. Her standards extended far beyond the spinning wheel. The 12 nights were sacred time, a period with its own rules, its own requirements, its own ways of being violated. And Perchta enforced all of them. If you worked during the 12 nights, she punished you. This sounds contradictory. She punishes laziness, but also punishes work, until you understand the logic. The work had to be done before the sacred time began. Once the 12 nights started, spinning was forbidden. The wheels turning might tangle fate itself, might catch wandering spirits in its threads, might disrupt the cosmic order of the year's transition. So you had to finish before Christmas, and you had to rest after. Both failure modes were punishable. If you ate the wrong food on Perchta night, she punished you. The 5th of January required specific meals, fish and gruel, nothing rich, nothing luxurious. If she cut you open and found meat in your stomach, or sweets, or anything else forbidden, well, she'd remove it, replace it with what you should have eaten, teach you the lesson you refused to learn on your own. If your house was dirty, she punished you. The home had to be clean for inspection, not just tidy, truly clean. The floors swept, the hearth cleared, everything in its proper place. A messy house suggested a messy soul, a lack of discipline, a failure to meet basic standards. If you showed her disrespect, she punished you. When Perchta came to your door, you acknowledged her. You offered her the proper food. You answered her questions honestly. You did not hide. You did not lie. You did not pretend you weren't home. She always knew, and she was always watching. What makes Perchta's punishments so disturbing isn't just their brutality. It's their precision. Her violence is never random, never arbitrary. It always fits the crime. The punishment matches the failure in a way that suggests cosmic justice rather than mere cruelty. Terrible justice, horrifying justice, but justice nonetheless. Didn't finish spinning? The raw materials that should have become thread now become your stuffing. Straw fills the space where productivity should have grown. You're literally filled with your own failure, your own unfinished business, your own wasted potential. Ate the wrong food? She finds it inside you and removes it, replaces it with what you should have eaten. Your stomach becomes a lesson in proper diet, forcibly corrected by the only teacher who never accepts excuses. Left your house dirty? She might sweep your intestines across the floor, let them trail through the filth you couldn't be bothered to clean, make your insides as messy as your outsides. Show everyone what kind of person you really were. Worked during the forbidden time. She tangles your own guts like the thread you shouldn't have been spinning, knots them, weaves them into something unusable, just like the fate you were trying to manipulate. Every punishment is a mirror, a reflection, a physical manifestation of the spiritual failure that prompted it. This is what makes Perchta more than a simple monster. She's not chaos. She's not random death. She's order. Terrible, inescapable order. She's the embodiment of consequences, of standards, of the principle that actions have results and failures have prices. You can avoid her. You can survive her. You just have to do your work, follow the rules, meet the standards. And if you can't do that, well, she has her knife, she has her straw, she has all the time in the world. But Perchta isn't only punishment. This is important to understand. Essential, really, to grasping what she meant to the people who believed in her. She wasn't a demon in the simple sense. Wasn't pure evil. Wasn't a force of destruction that existed only to harm. She was a judge. And judges don't only convict. If Frau Perchta inspects your home and finds everything in order, the spinning completed, the house clean, the proper food eaten, the appropriate respect shown, she doesn't leave empty-handed. She doesn't simply move on to the next house, neutral and indifferent. She rewards you. A silver coin appears in your shoe when you wake on January 6th, or in your spinning basket, or on your doorstep. Small, bright, valuable. A token of approval from a being who doesn't give approval easily. More than that, she blesses your household. The coming year will be prosperous. The spinning will go smoothly. The crops will grow. The animals will thrive. Her favor brings fortune in 100 small ways that you might not even notice until you look back and realize how well everything went. This is the Perchta that good households knew. The one that parents promised children they would see if they worked hard and behaved well. The beautiful woman in white who smiled and nodded and left gifts behind. She was the reward, the goal, the light at the end of the long winter's work. You just had to earn her. This duality, the punisher and the rewarder, the slitter and the giver, is Perchta's defining characteristic. She's not two separate beings wearing the same name. She's one being with two aspects, two faces that are equally her, equally real, equally likely to appear at your door depending on what she finds when she arrives. Think about what this means. A pure monster is simple. You fear it, you avoid it, you know it wants to hurt you, and you act accordingly. There's no ambiguity, no complexity, no relationship beyond predator and prey. But Perchta offers a relationship, a transaction, a covenant almost. You fulfill your obligations and she fulfills hers. You do your work and she rewards you. You slack off and she punishes you. It's not random. It's not arbitrary. It's a system, and systems can be navigated. This makes her more frightening in some ways, not less, because you can't blame bad luck if she comes for you with her knife. You can't claim you were targeted unfairly, victimized by a cruel universe. If she's slitting your belly, it's because you failed, because you didn't do what you were supposed to do, because you had every opportunity to avoid this, and you actively chose not to take it. The responsibility is yours. The consequences are hers. That's a terrifying kind of justice, and a strangely comforting one. When she comes to reward, Perchta is radiant. The descriptions from Alpine folklore paint a picture of almost impossible beauty. A woman dressed in white, her garments clean and bright despite the winter journey. Her hair might be golden or silver or black as the winter night. The accounts vary, but it's always beautiful, always well kept, always a sign of the care and discipline she values. Her face is young or ageless, or simply difficult to look at directly because of how much light seems to emanate from her. She moves gracefully. She speaks kindly. When she inspects your spinning wheel, she nods with approval. When she examines your clean floors, she smiles. This version of Perchta might stay a while, might warm herself at your fire, though she doesn't seem to need warmth, might accept the food and drink you've left out for her, eating delicately, appreciatively. She blesses your home before she leaves. The words vary by region, but the effect is the same. Protection, prosperity, the sense that you've been seen by something greater than yourself and found worthy. The children who glimpse her remember her as a fairy, a spirit of goodness. They grow up wanting to please her, wanting to see her smile, wanting to earn that silver coin. This is the Perchta of good households. This is what you get when you do your work. When she comes to punish, Perchta transforms. Or perhaps she doesn't transform at all. Perhaps the beautiful lady and the hideous crone are both equally real, equally her, and your perception simply matches what you deserve to see. The hag has an iron nose, long, hooked, sharp at the tip. Some stories say she uses it as a weapon, stabbing those who try to flee. Her skin is grey or greenish, wrinkled beyond any natural aging, hanging loose on bones that seem too large for her frame. Her clothes are the opposite of the White Lady's radiance. Rags, tatters, stained with old blood and other fluids that don't bear naming. She smells of decay, of garbage, of the straw she's about to stuff into your belly. Her knife is always visible. She doesn't hide it, doesn't pretend she's come for any other purpose. When the hag walks through your door, you know exactly what's going to happen. Behind her comes her retinue, wild spirits, ghost children, the souls of infants who died unbaptized, who follow her through the 12 nights, because she's the closest thing to a mother they have. Other beings, harder to describe, the Perchten, the masked ones, the beautiful and the terrible together, filling your house with chaos. She doesn't speak kindly now, doesn't smile. She simply begins her inspection. And when she finds what you already know she'll find, the unfinished spinning, the forbidden food, the disrespect, she reaches for her knife. The last thing lazy households see is that iron nose, those terrible eyes, and then the cutting begins. The 12 nights of Christmas weren't a celebration in the Alpine regions. They were a survival period. In German, they're called the Rauhnächte, the rough nights, or raw nights. 12 days of danger from December the 25th to January 6th, when the ordinary rules of reality loosened and things that usually stayed hidden walked freely through the world. To understand why these nights were so feared, you have to understand how people in the Alps conceived of time itself. The year was a living thing. It was born in spring, grew strong through summer, weakened in autumn, and died in winter. December 25th was its death, the old year finally expiring, giving way to whatever came next. January 6th, Epiphany, was the birth of the new year, fully arrived and ready to begin its own cycle. But between those dates, nothing. A gap, a void where no year existed at all. The boundaries between realms grew thin during these nights. With no year to anchor reality, the walls that separated the living from the dead, the human from the supernatural, the safe from the dangerous, all of them became permeable. Things leaked through. Things that normally stayed in their own domains could now visit ours. The dead walked during the Rauhnächte. Your ancestors, your recently deceased neighbors, everyone who'd passed on. They could return during these 12 nights. Sometimes they came to bless. Sometimes they came to warn. Sometimes they came for reasons no one could understand. Spirits wandered the mountain paths. Not all of them were ghosts of the human dead. Some were older, nature spirits, wild things, beings that predated human settlement in the Alps and resented the villages that had sprouted in their territory. The wild hunt rode through the skies. Perchta led her procession from village to village. Time itself became unstable. These 12 days existed outside the normal calendar, in a threshold space where anything was possible. Anything, including terrible things. Villages locked their doors during the Rauhnächte. Families stayed together, watching the fire, jumping at every sound from outside. Travel was forbidden, not just by practical wisdom, but by supernatural law. If you were caught on the roads during the 12 nights, the spirits might claim you. The rules that applied during the rest of the year didn't apply now. And new rules, older rules, stranger rules took their place. You didn't spin. You didn't hang laundry outside. You didn't eat certain foods on certain nights. You left offerings for the spirits. You kept your house immaculate, ready for inspection. You survived. If you were lucky, if you were careful, if you'd done your work before the Rauhnächte began. Why 12? The answer goes back to the calendar itself, to the mismatch between how we measure time and how time actually works. The lunar calendar gives us 12 months of roughly 29.5 days each. That's about 354 days per year. The solar calendar, the actual time it takes Earth to orbit the Sun, gives us about 365 days. The difference is roughly 11 days. 11 days that don't fit. 11 days of slippage between the moon's count and the sun's count. A gap in time itself. Different cultures handled this gap differently. Some added extra days to certain months. Some created intercalary periods, special times that existed outside the normal calendar, belonging to neither the old year nor the new. The 12 nights were such a period. From Christmas to Epiphany, time was suspended. The old year had ended, but the new year hadn't fully begun. You existed in a threshold state, a liminal zone where the normal rules didn't apply because, technically, you weren't in normal time at all. In this gap, spirits moved freely. Fate could be influenced or disrupted if you weren't careful. The spinning wheel, with its turning and its threads, was particularly dangerous. You might tangle the threads of destiny itself. You might catch a wandering soul in your yarn. You might spin the new year into chaos before it even properly started. So you stopped. You rested. You waited for the gap to close and normal time to resume. And you hoped that whatever walked during those 12 nights would pass you by. The Rauhnächte had rules, strict rules, rules that had to be followed precisely if you wanted to survive the gap between years. Don't spin or weave during the 12 nights. The wheel must be still. The loom must be silent. Any thread made during this time is cursed. And worse, the act of spinning might tangle fate, might catch spirits, might create knots in the fabric of reality that can never be undone. But, and this is crucial, all spinning must be finished before the 12 nights begin. Perchta will inspect. If she finds unfinished work, she'll know you were lazy during the time when work was permitted. The prohibition on spinning during the Rauhnächte isn't an excuse for not spinning before them. Don't hang laundry outside. Spirits will steal it. Use the sheets as shrouds, wear the clothes as they wander. If you leave cloth outside during the 12 nights, you might as well be inviting the dead to clothe themselves in your possessions. Don't eat rich food on certain nights. Perchte night especially requires fish and gruel, simple food, humble food. Feasting is for other times. These nights demand restraint. Do keep your house immaculate. Every surface cleaned, every tool in its place. The home must be ready for inspection because inspection is coming. The spirits who walk during the Rauchnacht will see your house, will judge it, will remember. Do leave offerings for the wandering spirits, food on the doorstep, drink by the fire, something to appease them, to acknowledge their presence, to show that you know they're there and you respect their power. Do finish all work before the nights begin. Whatever you were supposed to accomplish during the year, finish it. Don't carry debts or obligations into the new year. Don't leave loose ends. Perchta checks the spinning wheel. But more than that, she checks whether you're the kind of person who finishes what they start. January 5th, Perchte Nacht, the night of Perchta, the culmination of everything. This is the last of the 12 nights, the final inspection, the moment when all accounts are settled. Perchta walks through every village in the Alps on this night. She visits every home. She checks every spinning wheel, every hearth, every household that falls under her ancient jurisdiction. In some regions, people stayed awake all night on January 5th, not from celebration, from fear. They sat by their fires, watching the door, waiting for the knock that might or might not come. They listened for footsteps in the snow, for the sound of her retinue following behind her, for any indication that she was approaching. Sleep was dangerous on Perchte Nacht. If she came while you were sleeping, you might not wake up in time to receive her properly. You might miss the chance to show respect. You might be caught unaware, vulnerable, unable to defend yourself. Not that defense was really possible, but at least consciousness let you face your judgment with open eyes. Other households took a different approach. They left out food for her, a bowl of fish and gruel set on the table or by the door, the exact meal she required on her night. If she arrived and found her offering waiting, she might be satisfied, might eat and move on without a thorough inspection, might spare you the full examination if your hospitality showed that you already understood what she expected. Some families spoke her name before sleeping, a kind of prayer or acknowledgement or invitation. Frau Perchta, you are welcome here. We have done our work. We are ready for your judgment. The words varied, but the intent was the same. We know you're coming. We've prepared. Please, please find us worthy. Dawn on January 6th. Epiphany. Brought relief so profound it felt like resurrection. The 12 nights were over. The gap had closed. Normal time resumed. And if you'd survived Perchte Nacht with your belly intact, you'd earned a year of prosperity. If not, well, the village would find you in the morning, stuffed with straw, sewn up with a plowshare, a lesson to everyone else. Of all the things Frau Perchta could have chosen to care about, why spinning? Why not farming, or hunting, or any of the other essential tasks that kept Alpine communities alive? Why did this particular goddess attach herself to this particular craft? And why did she punish its neglect with such specific, grotesque violence? The answer goes back thousands of years. Back before Christianity, back before Rome, back to a time when spinning wasn't just a useful skill or an economic necessity, it was a cosmic act. The Fates spun thread. In Greek mythology, they were the Moirai, 3 sisters who controlled the destiny of every mortal and god. Clotho, the youngest, spun the thread of life. She sat at her wheel, drawing fiber into existence, creating the very substance of a person's time on earth. Lachesis, the middle sister, measured the thread. She determined how long each life would be, how much thread each person was allotted, and Atropos, the eldest, cut the thread. When she raised her shears, your life was over. Every life was a thread, spun at birth, measured through your days, cut at death. In Norse mythology, they were the Norns, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld, who sat at the base of Yggdrasil, the world tree, and wove the fates of gods and mortals alike. They didn't just spin individual lives. They wove the entire fabric of existence, determining what would happen, what had happened, what was happening at any given moment. The metaphor was so universal, so intuitive, that it appeared independently in cultures around the world. Life as thread, fate as weaving, the cosmos as a great loom on which everything is made. And the women who sat at spinning wheels were, in some sense, participating in that cosmic act. They weren't just making thread. They were doing what the gods did. They were engaging in the fundamental work of creation, transforming chaos into order, raw material into usable form. A spinner was sacred. Her work was sacred. And neglecting that work was a kind of blasphemy, a refusal to participate in the divine order, a rejection of the cosmic process that made everything exist. Perchta was the goddess who enforced the sacredness of spinning, who made sure that the cosmic work got done, who punished those who took the sacred lightly. The belly-slitting makes more sense in this context. It's not just punishment for laziness, it's correction of cosmic disorder. It's putting the raw materials back into the body that should have transformed them, forcing completion of the sacred cycle one way or another. Spinning was women's work, exclusively, universally, across virtually all traditional societies. This wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't oppression in the simple sense. It was practical division of labor. Spinning required sitting still for long hours, could be done while watching children, could be picked up and put down as other duties demanded. It fit into the rhythm of women's lives in a way that other essential tasks didn't. But practicality became identity. A woman was a spinner. The distaff, the tool that held unspun fiber, became a symbol of femininity itself. The distaff side meant the female line of a family. A woman without a spinning wheel was like a farmer without a plow, and a woman who didn't spin was a failure. This is harsh by modern standards, but in a world where every piece of clothing, every bedsheet, every length of rope and twine had to be spun by hand, a lazy spinner was a genuine burden. She wasn't just failing to contribute, she was actively taking from the household, consuming food and space and warmth, while others did the work. Perchta enforced this standard with supernatural force. She was, in a sense, the ultimate expression of social pressure. The village might gossip about a lazy spinner. The family might resent her, but Perchta would actually kill her, would cut her open and fill her with the materials she should have transformed. The threat kept women at their wheels through the long, dark winters, hour after hour, day after day, spinning the fiber that would become the fabric that would keep everyone alive. Perchta made sure the work got done. Here's the thing about Frau Perchta. She wasn't always a demon. She wasn't always a figure of terror, a belly-slitter, a creature of horror stories told to frighten children and motivate lazy spinners. That's what she became. But it's not what she started as. Scholars who study Alpine folklore believe Perchta was once a goddess. The evidence is fragmentary. It always is, with pre-Christian European religions, but it points in a consistent direction. Her name means bright or shining, which isn't the kind of name you give a demon. Her association with spinning connects her to fate goddesses across Indo-European cultures. Her dual nature, beautiful and terrible, rewarding and punishing, matches the pattern of other goddesses who embodied natural forces. She was probably a deity of the winter turning, of the transition between years, of spinning and fate in the household. Communities worshipped her, left offerings for her, celebrated her during the darkest nights of the year. Then Christianity came to the Alps, and the church had a problem. Perchta was too popular to ignore, too embedded in folk practice to simply erase. People believed in her, people followed her rules, people feared her. So the church did what it always did with stubborn pagan holdovers. It demonized them. The goddess became a demon. The sacred figure became a wicked one. The rituals that had been worship became superstition. The stories were adjusted, not eliminated, just reframed. Perchta was now a creature of darkness, associated with hell, connected to witchcraft and Satan. But here's the thing. The adjustment didn't change what she actually did. She still inspected households, still rewarded the diligent, still punished the lazy, still walked during the 12 nights with her wild retinue. The framing changed. The function remained exactly the same. Frau Perchta isn't alone. Across Germanic folklore, she has a sister, or a twin, or possibly another version of herself, split by geography and local tradition into a separate figure. Her name is Frau Holder, or Holler, or Hulda. Like Perchta, Holder is associated with spinning. Like Perchta, she rewards the industrious and punishes the lazy. Like Perchta, she has a dual nature, sometimes beautiful, sometimes hideous. Like Perchta, she walks during the winter, leading processions of spirits through the dark nights. The similarities are too extensive to be coincidence. In some regions of Germany, Holder is the primary figure, and Perchta is barely known. In the Alps, it's the reverse, but the line between them blurs. Some scholars argue they're the same goddess with different regional names. Others argue they were once separate deities who merged over time, trading characteristics back and forth until they became nearly indistinguishable. Holder has her own specific traits. She lives at the bottom of wells and lakes, or rather she rules a realm that can be accessed through water. In the fairy tale Frau Holler, a girl falls into a well and enters Holder's domain, where she's tested and rewarded for her diligence. Holder shakes her feather bed to make snow fall. When it snows in Germany, people say Frau Holler is making her bed. But like Perchta, she inspects spinning. Like Perchta, she punishes those who fail to complete their work. Like Perchta, she demands respect during her sacred times. They're sisters in function, whatever their mythological genealogy. Two expressions of the same ancient idea, that the women's work of spinning mattered to the cosmos itself, and that the cosmos would enforce its completion. To understand Perchta, you have to understand the Alps in winter. These aren't gentle hills. These aren't the rolling green slopes you see in summer travel brochures. These are serious mountains, some of the highest in Europe, with peaks that scrape the sky and valleys so deep the sun disappears from them entirely during the darkest months. When winter came, the passes closed. This happened with brutal finality. One day, the route over the mountain was difficult but passable. The next day, after a single heavy snowfall, it was gone, buried under meters of snow that wouldn't melt until spring. The roads you'd used all summer and autumn simply ceased to exist. Snow piled up, not in inches, but in feet, sometimes meters. Villages that sat on hillsides watched the white wall climb higher and higher. Roofs had to be cleared constantly, or they'd collapse under the weight. First floors became basements, buried beneath the accumulation. The routes that connected villages to the outside world became impassable. Communities that had traded and traveled and visited during the warmer months were suddenly completely isolated. Imagine what that meant. Whatever you had on the day the snow closed the passes, that was what you had until spring. The food you'd stored, smoked meat, dried vegetables, preserved dairy. The fuel you'd gathered, wood stacked in neat piles, carefully measured to last the season. The clothes you'd made, every garment spun and woven and sewn by hand in your own household. There was no resupply, no emergency delivery, no way to get anything else if you ran out. If you'd miscalculated, stored too little food, gathered insufficient wood, failed to make enough clothing, you discovered your error in January or February, when it was far too late to correct it. The isolation bred a particular kind of culture. Self-reliance wasn't a virtue to be admired. It was survival, mandatory and non-negotiable. You did your work during the productive months, or you died during the unproductive ones. There was no middle ground, no safety net, no one coming to save you if you hadn't prepared properly. And in the long dark nights of that isolation, with nothing but firelight and each other and the wind howling down from the peaks, people told stories about what walked in the snow, about what judged them, about what happened to those who hadn't done their work when they had the chance. Perchta was born from those nights, from that isolation, from the absolute necessity of productivity and the absolute certainty of consequences. She was the mountains themselves, given form and purpose and a very sharp knife. Let me be specific about why spinning mattered so much. In the Alpine winter, you wore what you'd made, your clothes, your blankets, the ropes that held your buildings together, the sacks that stored your grain. All of it came from thread, and all thread came from spinning. The process was endless. First, you had to raise the animals, sheep for wool, or grow the plants, flax for linen. Then you had to harvest the raw material, then clean it, card it, prepare it for spinning, then actually spin it hour after hour, transforming the fluffy fiber into usable thread. Then ply the thread, twist multiple strands together for strength, then weave it or knit it or otherwise turn it into fabric, then cut and sew the fabric into the final product. Every piece of clothing you owned represented weeks or months of work. Every blanket, every curtain, every item that kept you warm or functional or alive. If you didn't spin, you didn't have thread. If you didn't have thread, you didn't have fabric. If you didn't have fabric, you didn't have clothes. If you didn't have clothes, in an Alpine winter, you died. The math was that simple. The stakes were that high. Spinning wasn't a hobby or a pleasant pastime. It was survival work, as essential as growing food or storing firewood. A lazy spinner wasn't just failing to contribute. She was actively threatening everyone who depended on what she should have been producing. Perchta's punishments start to make more sense in this context. They're excessive by any normal standard. Disembowelment for failing to finish your spinning seems wildly disproportionate. But these weren't normal circumstances. A woman who didn't spin could doom her family, could leave them without the clothes and blankets they needed to survive the winter. In that context, terrible punishments for terrible failures start to seem almost reasonable. Perchta was a tool. I don't mean that dismissively. I mean that her stories served a practical function in Alpine communities. She enforced the spinning deadline, all work done by Twelfth Night, with supernatural force. Think about the psychology of it. You're sitting at your spinning wheel in late December. The fire is warm. You're tired. The work is tedious, endless, soul-numbing in its repetition. Every fiber looks like every other fiber. Your hands are sore, your back aches. You want to stop, but Perchta is coming. Not in some abstract sense, not as a vague moral principle, as an actual being who will actually cut you open if you don't finish, who is counting down the days just like you are, except she's looking forward to inspection while you're dreading it. That fear keeps you spinning. It keeps your daughters spinning, your sisters, your mother-in-law who would rather be resting. Everyone who might otherwise slack off, might let the work slide, might tell themselves they'll finish tomorrow or next week or somehow before it matters. Perchta makes it matter now. The supernatural threat ensured the real-world work got done. Fear of belly-slitting was a powerful motivator, more powerful than social pressure, more powerful than family expectation, more powerful than any human authority. Because humans can be argued with. Humans can be appeased or fooled or persuaded to look the other way. Perchta can't. She comes, she inspects, she judges, and her judgment is final. That's why the stories lasted so long. That's why they were told and retold across centuries, in village after village, generation after generation. They worked. They produced the behavior they were designed to produce. The terror had a function, and the function was survival. Frau Perchta doesn't walk alone. Behind her, always behind her, never ahead, because she is the leader and they are the followers, comes a procession unlike anything else in European folklore. They're called the Perchten, and they're as varied and strange and terrifying as the goddess they serve. Imagine seeing them approach through the snow on a January night. First, you hear them. Bells. Not the pleasant chimes of church bells, but harsh, discordant clanging. Dozens of bells, all ringing at once, creating a wall of sound that announces their presence from a mile away. Then voices, howling, shrieking, making noises that sound like the wind through mountain passes, like avalanches beginning, like the voices of the dead calling out for company. Then you see them, masked figures, some with animal faces, wolves, bears, goats, creatures that don't exist in any natural bestiary. Horns sprout from their heads, twisted and curving, decorated with ribbons or left bare and threatening. Fur covers their bodies. Real fur, animal pelts, making them look like beasts that learn to walk upright. Their claws might be carved from wood or bone, but they look sharp enough to tear flesh. They move erratically, not walking in orderly procession, but running, leaping, dancing, chasing. Some of them carry torches that cast wild shadows across the snow. Some carry switches or whips. Some carry things you can't quite identify in the darkness. And at the center of this chaos, moving with perfect calm, comes Perchta herself. Some of them were human once, or so the stories say. They joined Perchta's procession by accident, caught outside during the 12 nights, swept up in the wild hunt, unable to find their way back to the world of the living. Others joined by curse, doomed to walk with her for some crime or failure. Now they're hers forever, unable to return to the lives they left behind. Some of them are spirits, nature spirits, ghosts of the mountains themselves, beings that exist only during the 12 nights and dissolve back into nothing when the gap between years closes and normal time resumes. Some of them are the souls of the dead, specifically the unbaptized dead. Infants who died before receiving the sacrament, condemned by church doctrine to wander forever. Perchta gathers them, leads them, is their mother in a terrible way. The procession moves through villages like a wave, like a storm, blessing some houses, cursing others, filling the night with noise and chaos, and a kind of savage energy that can't be contained or controlled. This is the wild retinue, the Perchten, the army of the Lady of the 12th Night. The Perchten divide into two categories. The first is the Sciach Perchten, the ugly Perchten, or scary Perchten. These are the ones you picture when you imagine demons. When you think of nightmares given physical form, their masks are monstrous, exaggerated features, bulging eyes, gaping mouths, tusks and fangs and horns that spiral in impossible directions. They're often covered in fur or rough cloth, making them look like beasts that learn to walk upright. They carry bells that clang discordantly, announcing their presence, making it impossible to pretend you don't know they're coming. They run rather than walk. They leap and charge and sometimes chase people through the streets. Children flee from them. Adults too, if they're smart. The Sciach Perchten aren't gentle. Their purpose, according to the traditions, is to drive away evil spirits. This sounds contradictory. They look evil, they act evil. How can they drive away evil? But in the logic of Alpine folk belief, it makes a certain sense. The 12 nights are dangerous because all kinds of spirits walk freely. Not all of those spirits serve Perchta. Some are chaos agents, random and malevolent, threatening villages without the structure or rules that Perchta provides. The Sciach Perchten chase those spirits away, their controlled chaos, wielded against uncontrolled chaos. They're terrifying, but they're Perchta's terror, which means they're part of a system that includes rewards as well as punishments. Better to be frightened by Perchta's demons than destroyed by wild ones. The second category is the schöne Perchten, the beautiful Perchten. Their masks are elegant, serene faces, sometimes angelic, sometimes resembling idealized human features. They wear white or bright colors. They move gracefully, in contrast to the chaotic rushing of their ugly counterparts. They represent the other face of Perchta, the blessing rather than the curse, the reward rather than the punishment. Where the Sciach Perchten drive away evil, the schöne Perchten invite good. They bring fertility to the fields that will be planted in spring. They bless the animals in the barns. They leave prosperity in their wake, a promise that the coming year will be fruitful. In the processions, the Perchtenläufe that still happen in Alpine villages today, the beautiful and the ugly walk together. They're not separate groups with separate purposes. They're two aspects of the same phenomenon. This mirrors Perchta herself. She is beautiful and she is hideous. She rewards and she punishes. She blesses and she disembowels. The Perchten and Perchten together embody the same duality that defines their mistress. You don't get one without the other. The beauty only means something because the ugliness is real. The rewards only matter because the punishments are terrible. Among the retinue, there's a special category that deserves attention. The children, not living children, ghost children, the souls of infants who died before baptism. According to medieval church doctrine, they couldn't enter heaven because they hadn't received the sacrament that washed away original sin. They were innocent of any actual wrongdoing, but they were still condemned. The church assigned them to limbo, a place that wasn't quite hell, but wasn't heaven either. A waiting room of sorts, an eternal holding pattern. But in folk belief, they went somewhere else. They went to Perchta. She gathered them, led them through the 12 nights as part of her procession, gave them, in her way, a kind of afterlife. They weren't saved, weren't redeemed, weren't at peace, but they weren't alone either. They had a mother of sorts. A terrible mother who slitted bellies and stuffed them with straw, but a mother nonetheless. Some versions of the legend say Perchta cares for them, protects them in her fashion. The unbaptized dead have no other advocate, no other powerful figure who claims them, so she does. Other versions say they simply follow her, drawn by her power, unable to resist the pull of a being so ancient and so strongly associated with fate and death. Either way, they're there. Small shapes in the procession, tiny voices in the cacophony of the Perchten. A reminder that death comes for everyone, even those who've barely lived at all. The wild hunt is one of the most widespread mythological motifs in Northern and Central Europe. A spectral procession that rides through the winter sky, usually during storms. A host of ghosts and demons and terrible beings, led by a fearsome figure, hunting through the night for souls or sport or reasons no mortal can understand. In most regions, the leader is male. Odin, the Norse All-Father, rides his 8-legged horse, Sleipnir, at the head of the hunt, or it's Herne the Hunter, the antlered ghost of English folklore, or it's some local variant, a dead king, a cursed nobleman, a figure of masculine power and violence. But in the Alps, the leader is often Perchta. She rides through the storms. She leads the dead. She's the queen of the wild hunt in this region, as terrifying and powerful as Odin is in the north. This connection is important because it places Perchta in a much larger mythological context. She's not just a local spinner goddess, a minor figure concerned with household cleanliness and fiber arts. She's a deity of death and fate, of the boundary between worlds, of the terrible power that moves through the winter darkness. The belly-slitting is almost incidental compared to this cosmic role. She's the kind of being who leads armies of the dead through the sky. Inspecting spinning wheels is practically a hobby by comparison. To Alpine villagers, the wild hunt wasn't abstract mythology. It was the sound of the wind. When winter storms descended from the mountains, howling, shrieking, battering against the walls of houses, people heard voices in the wind, heard hoofbeats, heard the cries of the dead and the bellowing of supernatural hounds. The storm wasn't just weather. It was Perchta's procession passing overhead, hunting through the night. You stayed inside during storms, Not just because of the cold, not just because of the snow, because of what was riding in the storm. If you were caught outside when the wild hunt passed, terrible things might happen. You might be swept up and carried away, forced to join the procession until you became one of the dead yourself. You might see things that drove you mad, glimpses of the afterlife, visions of your own death, knowledge that no living person should possess. You might simply disappear, found frozen in the morning, if found at all, with an expression of terror on your face. The hunt didn't target people specifically, the way Perchta's belly-slitting did. It was more like a natural disaster, a force of chaos that destroyed whatever fell in its path. But Perchta led it, controlled it, to whatever extent it could be controlled. The storm was hers. This meant that every winter storm was a reminder of her power. Every howling wind was her voice. Even if you'd finished your spinning, even if your house was clean, even if you'd done everything right, she was still out there, still riding, still leading the dead through the darkness. The church had a problem with Perchta. She was too popular, too embedded in folk practice, too connected to traditions that people weren't willing to give up, no matter what the priests said. You could preach about the one true God all you wanted, but when January 5th came around, people were still leaving food out for Frau Perchta, so the church did what it always did. It reframed. Perchta was declared a demon, an agent of Satan. Her procession was the hosts of hell, not a gathering of the honored dead. Her punishments were the work of evil, not divine justice. Her rewards, well, the church was less clear about those because they complicated the narrative. The masked processions, the Perchtenläufer, were banned. The costumes were burned. The traditions were denounced from pulpits across the Alpine region. It didn't work. People kept telling the stories, kept fearing her, kept leaving offerings on Perchten Nacht. The bans pushed the traditions underground, but couldn't eliminate them. In remote villages where church authority was weakest, the old ways continued almost unchanged. And here's the thing. The Christianization didn't actually change what Perchta did. The church said she was evil, but her behavior stayed exactly the same. She still rewarded the diligent and punished the lazy. She still enforced the same rules, maintained the same standards, appeared on the same nights. The framing was different. The theology was different. But Perchta herself was unchanged. She didn't care what the priests called her. She had work to do. On Perchta night, you ate what Perchta told you to eat. Fish and gruel. That was the traditional meal, the only acceptable meal for January 5th. Not one of several options. Not a suggestion. The only food that wouldn't get you killed. The specific type of fish varied by region. Herring was common in areas with access to trade routes from the coast. Carp was traditional in places with fish ponds. Trout from mountain streams. Whatever freshwater fish was available after months of winter, preserved by smoking or salting or simply by the cold that kept everything frozen. The gruel was even simpler. Oats or barley cooked into a thick porridge. No butter, that was too rich. No cream, that was too luxurious. No honey, no spices, no embellishment of any kind. Plain, humble, sustaining, and nothing more. This was your dinner on the night Perchta walked. No meat. The warmth and richness of pork or beef or lamb was forbidden. No sweets. The comfort of dessert was denied. No rich foods of any kind. No cheese, no eggs. Nothing that suggested abundance or pleasure or celebration. The 12 nights were a kind of sacred fast, a period of restraint and abstinence. While the boundaries between worlds were thin and dangerous spirits walked freely, humans were expected to be humble, to take up as little space as possible, to avoid drawing attention through excess or luxury. Perchte Nacht was the culmination of this period. You ended the dangerous time as you'd hopefully lived through it, modestly, humbly, without excess. You showed the spirits, showed Perchte specifically, that you understood your place, that you weren't prideful, that you respected the sacred nature of these 12 days. If you violated this rule, Perchte would know. She always knew. She could smell what you'd eaten, could see it somehow, through walls, through darkness, through whatever lay between her and your kitchen. The evidence would be there, in your stomach, waiting for her inspection. And if she found the wrong food inside you, she had ways of correcting your diet. Why fish specifically? The explanation goes back to the liminal nature of the 12 nights themselves. Fish are boundary creatures. They live in water, a substance associated with death, with the underworld, with the passage between realms. They're neither fully of the earth nor of the air. They exist in a medium that humans can't survive, a world we can see but can't enter. During a liminal time, the gap between years, the threshold between old and new, boundary food was appropriate. Fish matched the energy of the period. Eating something solidly of the earth, like beef or pork, would be jarring, inappropriate, a violation of the cosmic mood. There were practical reasons too. By early January, most of the meat that had been slaughtered in autumn was either eaten or needed to be preserved for the remaining winter months. Fish, on the other hand, could be caught through holes in the ice, could be smoked and stored indefinitely, could be spared when mammal meat couldn't. And fish was fasting food. The church had long designated it as appropriate for days of abstinence when meat was forbidden. This gave the Perchte Nacht meal a veneer of Christian respectability, even though the tradition was far older than Christianity itself. The gruel served the same purposes: simple, humble, appropriate for a sacred time when excess was dangerous. What happened if you ate the wrong thing? What if you decided that you didn't care about traditions, didn't believe in old superstitions, didn't see any reason to choke down fish and gruel when there was perfectly good sausage hanging in the rafters? Perchte would come, would inspect, would know somehow that you'd violated her feast. And then she'd open you up. She'd cut through your belly and find the forbidden food, the meat, the sweets, whatever you'd eaten that you shouldn't have. She'd see it there, in your stomach, proof of your transgression. She'd remove it, not neatly, not surgically. She'd pull out your stomach, your intestines, everything that held the evidence of your crime. She'd dispose of them. The stories aren't clear on how, but the disposal is permanent. You don't get those parts back. And then she'd replace them with what you should have eaten. Fish and gruel stuffed into your abdominal cavity, filling the space where your digestive system used to be. She'd sew you up, her plowshare needle dragging through your flesh, and leave you there, a corpse filled with fish, a body that finally contained the proper food, even if it was too late to do you any good. The message was clear. You will eat what Perchte commands. If you refuse to do it voluntarily, she'll do it for you. One way or another, her rules will be followed. Smart households didn't wait for Perchte to inspect. They left food out for her. A bowl of fish and gruel, placed on the table or by the door before the family went to sleep on Perchten Nacht. An offering, an appeasement, a signal that this household understood the rules and was prepared to follow them. If Perchta arrived and found her meal waiting, she might be satisfied, might eat or at least acknowledge the offering, and move on without a thorough inspection. The food was proof of compliance, evidence that the household took her seriously, that they weren't the kind of people who needed to be punished. It was also practical hospitality. Perchta was walking all night, inspecting countless homes, leading her retinue through the cold and dark. She was hungry. She was tired, in whatever way such beings get tired. Offering her food was simple courtesy, and courtesy with beings like Perchta could save your life. Some families went further. They spoke to her directly, addressing the empty room as they set out the food. Frau Perchta, you are welcome in our home. We offer you this meal with respect. We have done our work and are ready for your judgment. The words varied, but the intent was the same. We see you. We honor you. Please, please let us live through the night. Whether Perchta actually ate the food is unclear. In the morning, the bowl might be empty or might still be full. Some said she consumed the spiritual essence of the food, leaving the physical matter behind. Others said she ate like any other being. Still others said the offerings were really for her retinue, the ghost children, the wild spirits, who were easier to appease than their mistress. Whatever the truth, the tradition continued. Every Perchten Nacht, across the Alpine region, bowls of fish and gruel appeared on tables and doorsteps, just in case. The church tried very hard to kill Frau Perchta. From pulpits across the Alpine region, priests denounced her as a demon, a pagan holdover, a figure of wickedness that good Christians should reject. They forbade the stories, banned the offerings, condemned anyone who participated in Perchten traditions as guilty of superstition at best and devil worship at worst. The Inquisition took an interest. In the witch-hunting centuries, Perchta beliefs could get you investigated, or worse. The line between folk tradition and witchcraft was blurry enough that zealous prosecutors could interpret almost anything as evidence of satanic involvement. The masked processions were particular targets. Wearing masks was associated with paganism, with the concealment of identity for sinful purposes, with the kind of wild behavior that respectable Christians should avoid. Authorities confiscated costumes, burned them, arrested people who persisted in the old traditions. The name itself was weaponized. Perchta became associated with demons in religious literature. She appeared in sermons as an example of the evils that lurked in folk belief, a cautionary tale about what happened when people clung to pre-Christian practices instead of embracing the true faith. For centuries, this pressure was relentless. Every generation of Alpine Christians was told that Perchta was evil, that believing in her was sinful, that the old ways had to be abandoned. And yet she survived. In remote villages, where church authority was weakest and tradition was strongest, the stories continued. Grandparents told grandchildren about Perchta. Parents left offerings on Perchten Nacht, even as they attended Mass on Christmas. The two belief systems, Christian and folk, coexisted in the same households, the same minds, without apparent contradiction. The masked processions went underground but didn't disappear. They became folk festivals rather than religious rituals, entertainment rather than worship. The church could accept that, barely, as long as no one explicitly claimed to be honoring a pagan goddess. And Perchta herself simply continued. She didn't need the church's permission to exist, didn't need official sanction. She lived in the stories, in the fears, in the practical wisdom of people who knew that spinning had to be finished by 12th night. As long as those things persisted, she persisted. The suppression lasted centuries. The tradition lasted longer. By the 19th century, folklorists were documenting Perchta beliefs as a matter of cultural heritage. By the 20th century, the traditions were being actively revived, promoted as regional identity, celebrated as a connection to the pre-Christian past. The church had lost. Perchta had won. Not through confrontation. She never fought the church directly, just through endurance, through being too useful, too embedded, too psychologically necessary to eliminate. She waited them out. And she's still here. Today, in Austria and Bavaria, the Perchtenläufe continue. Every winter, around the time of the Rauhnächte, masked figures parade through villages, hundreds of them sometimes. Elaborate costumes that take months to create, masks carved from wood and decorated with horns and fur and features that would be at home in any horror film. The preparation begins in autumn. Carvers work on masks for weeks, shaping blocks of pine or linden wood into faces that have been passed down through generations. Some families have been making the same mask designs for centuries. The knowledge transmitted from father to son, from master carver to apprentice. The costumes themselves are works of art. Real animal pelts, carefully preserved and sewn together. Bells sourced from specific foundries, chosen for their particular tone. Horns that might come from goats or cattle or deer, attached at angles that maximize their intimidating silhouette. The Perchten dominate these events. The ugly ones, the terrifying ones. They run through the streets, chasing spectators, ringing their bells, embodying the chaos that Perchta's retinue always represented. Children scream and flee. Adults too, caught up in the moment, remembering perhaps some ancestral fear they didn't know they carried. It's become a tourist attraction. People travel from around the world to see the Perchtenläufe, to experience the strange thrill of being chased by demons through a snow-covered village. Hotels book up months in advance. Television crews film the processions. The events have official websites, ticketing systems, all the infrastructure of modern tourism. Instagram is full of Perchten selfies now. Influencers pose with the masked figures, perfectly lit, perfectly composed, turning ancient terror into content. But something authentic remains underneath. Talk to the people who wear the masks, who carve them by hand, who've inherited the tradition from their parents and grandparents. For them, this isn't just performance. It's not just cultural heritage or a way to attract tourist money. It's something that matters, something that connects them to a past that the modern world has mostly forgotten. They'll tell you about the feeling of putting on the mask, about how it changes something inside them, about how they're not quite themselves when they're running through the streets. They're something older, something wilder, something that serves Perchta, whether they believe in her literally or not. Perchta is real to them. Maybe not as a goddess who will actually show up and slit anyone's belly, but real in the way that matters, as a presence, a tradition, a figure who embodies something important about who they are and where they come from. The Perchtenläufe are her survival, her persistence, her ongoing presence in a world that's changed almost beyond recognition since she first walked these mountains 1,000 years ago. She adapts, she endures, she continues, just like she always has. In recent years, Perchta has found a new audience. Horror fans have discovered her. Writers and filmmakers and artists looking for something different, something that isn't vampires or zombies or the usual suspects, have found in Perchta a figure of genuine disturbing power. The belly slitting is what catches attention first. It's visceral in a way that few mythological punishments are. Specific, gory, imaginable. The image of a woman being cut open and stuffed with straw is horror movie material, ready-made for the genre. But there's more to it than just the gore. Perchta represents a kind of horror that modern audiences find particularly unsettling. The horror of judgment. She doesn't kill randomly. She doesn't target everyone. She kills the lazy, the undisciplined, the people who didn't meet the standard. There's a moral dimension to her violence that makes it more disturbing, not less. You could be safe from her. You could avoid her entirely. All you had to do was finish your work, follow the rules, meet the expectations. The fact that people didn't, that they earned her punishment, makes her victims somehow complicit in their own deaths. That's unsettling in a way that pure monster stories aren't. It forces you to wonder, would I have finished the spinning? Would I have eaten the proper food? Would I pass Perchta's inspection, or would I be found wanting? Like Krampus, like Grilla, Perchta is coming back in her scary form. The sanitized versions are being set aside in favor of the original terror. We want our monsters monstrous again. And Perchta, the belly-slitter, the hag with the iron nose, is very happy to oblige. At her core, Frau Perchta is not chaos. This is important to understand, because her violence is so extreme that it's easy to mistake her for a simple monster, for a force of destruction, random and malevolent, that exists only to harm. The kind of creature you can't prepare for or protect against, that might come for anyone at any time for any reason or no reason at all. She's not. She's order. Terrible, inescapable, unmerciful order. Perchta enforces rules, standards, expectations. She doesn't make them up arbitrarily. They existed before her, or perhaps they are her, expressions of the cosmic principle that actions have consequences and obligations must be met. Think about what it means to have a figure like this in your mythology. The rules are clear. Finish your spinning, clean your house, eat the proper food, show respect during the sacred time. There's nothing ambiguous here, nothing open to interpretation, nothing that requires theological expertise to understand. A child can grasp these rules. A peasant who's never read a book can follow them perfectly. The punishments are severe, grotesquely, memorably, unforgettably severe, but they're not arbitrary. They flow directly from the failures they punish. Didn't finish spinning, stuffed with the materials you should have transformed, ate the wrong food, those foods removed and replaced. There's a terrible logic to it, a cosmic poetry. This is what makes Perchta genuinely frightening rather than merely disgusting. A random monster is scary, but it's also, paradoxically, somewhat comforting. If death is random, then there's nothing you can do, so why worry? You might be killed by a bear or struck by lightning, or eaten by demons regardless of how you live your life. So live however you want. It doesn't matter. Perchta offers no such comfort, no such excuse. You know exactly what she demands. You know exactly what happens if you fail. The outcome is entirely in your hands. If she comes for you with her knife, it won't be because you were unlucky, because fate was cruel, because the universe is random and unfair. It will be because you failed, because you didn't do what you were supposed to do, because you had every opportunity to avoid this fate, and you actively chose, not to take it. The responsibility is yours. The consequences are hers. That's a more mature fear than simple monster dread. It's the fear of judgment, of accountability, of being weighed and found wanting by a standard you knew about all along. And it's a fear that never entirely goes away, no matter how old you get or how much you accomplish. There's always another deadline, another obligation, another standard you might fail to meet. Perchta is always watching, and the inspection is always coming. Consider what Perchta represented to women in the Alpine regions. She ruled over women's work. Spinning, weaving, the domestic arts that women performed and that society depended on. These were her domain. These were the activities she inspected, judged, enforced. In a world where women had limited formal power, couldn't own property in many places, couldn't vote, couldn't hold office, were legally subordinate to fathers and husbands, Perchta represented something different. Supernatural authority. She couldn't be overruled by any man. No husband could protect his wife from Perchta's judgment if the spinning wasn't done. No father could intervene on his daughter's behalf. No king or bishop or emperor had authority over her. As the church learned when it tried to suppress her, she was power that belonged to the feminine sphere. Power that enforced feminine standards, power that validated women's work as important enough to be supernaturally regulated. This cuts both ways, of course. Perchta's enforcement was brutal, and the standards she enforced were demanding. She could be seen as the ultimate oppressor, the internalized patriarchy made literal, the voice that told women they had to spin faster, work harder, never rest. But she could also be seen as recognition, as the acknowledgement that what women did mattered enough for the cosmos to care about, mattered enough for a goddess to oversee. In a world that often treated women's work as invisible, Perchta made it visible, made it the center of her entire mythology, made it literally a matter of life and death. Why are we bringing her back? Why, in the 21st century, are people seeking out the original Perchta, the Belly-Slitter, the hag, the terrifying judge, instead of being satisfied with sanitized Christmas cheer? Part of it is the appeal of horror itself. We like being scared, in controlled doses. We like the thrill of encountering something dark and surviving it. But there's something more. Modern life has removed most of the consequences that Perchta represented. We don't spin our own thread anymore. We don't face starvation if we don't finish our work by a certain deadline. The specific standards she enforced have become obsolete, but the principle behind those standards hasn't. The idea that work matters, that deadlines matter, that obligations must be met, and laziness has costs. These things are still true. We've just lost the supernatural enforcement mechanism that made them feel urgent. And maybe we miss that. Maybe there's something psychologically satisfying about a figure who holds you accountable, who doesn't accept excuses, who judges your output rather than your intentions, your results rather than your feelings about the process. We're surrounded by messages telling us we're good enough as we are, that we should go easy on ourselves, that productivity culture is toxic and we should embrace rest and self-care. Perchta says the opposite. Perchta says, finish your work or face the consequences. No exceptions, no appeals, no mercy. And something in us, some ancient part that remembers when unfinished work could mean death, responds to that, recognizes it, maybe even needs it. Tonight, somewhere in the Alps, Perchta walks. The old woman, or the young one, the beautiful lady in white, her garments pristine despite the snow and the long journey. Or the hag with the iron nose, her knife gleaming in the moonlight, her sack already half full of straw. She's making her rounds, just as she has every January 5th for over 1,000 years. The villages have changed around her. The wooden houses have been replaced by concrete. The dirt roads are paved now. Electric lights blaze from every window, pushing back the darkness that was once total and terrifying. The spinning wheels that once occupied every household have been moved to museums or attics or decorative corners where they serve as reminders of a past that no one actually remembers. She's checking spinning wheels that no one uses anymore. The last professional hand spinners died generations ago. The wool comes from factories now, processed by machines that never tire, never slack off, never need supernatural motivation to meet their deadlines. The spinning wheel in the corner of an Austrian farmhouse is decoration, not necessity. Something to show tourists, something to photograph, something that connects the present to a past that exists only in stories. But Perchta still checks. She opens the door, or passes through it, because doors are for mortals, and examines the wheel, runs her fingers along the spindle, looks in the basket where the unspun fiber should be, where it would be if anyone still did this work. The basket is empty, has been empty for decades, will be empty forever unless some hipster artisan decides to take up hand spinning as a hobby. Does Perchta understand this? Does she know that the world has changed, that her specific concerns have become irrelevant, that no one fears the belly slitting anymore because no one does the work that would trigger it? Or does she still look for lazy spinners, still check for unfinished work, still carry her knife and her straw in expectation of finding someone who has failed? The stories don't say. The stories never anticipated a world where spinning wouldn't matter, but her principle remains. The idea that work must be done, that deadlines are real, that laziness has consequences and obligations cannot be escaped. She's adapted before, when she transformed from goddess to demon, when she went underground during the centuries of suppression, when she emerged again as folk tradition, tourist attraction, horror icon. She'll adapt again. She always does, because the fear she represents isn't really about spinning. It's about being judged, being found wanting, being held to a standard you failed to meet. That fear doesn't become obsolete. That fear is eternal. When Perchta appears at your door, she asks a simple question. Have you finished your work? Not, have you tried? Not, do you have a good excuse? Not, were you sick? Were you busy? Were there circumstances beyond your control? Just, have you finished? She doesn't care about your reasons. She cares about results. And if she finds you wanting, if the work isn't done, if the house isn't clean, If the proper respect hasn't been shown, she has her knife, she has her straw, she has a plowshare for a needle, and all the time in eternity. This is the terror she offers. Not random death, but earned death. Not chaos, but consequence. Her question echoes through the centuries, through all the changes in technology and society and belief, through the death of the spinning economy and the rise of the industrial age and the coming of whatever comes next. Have you finished your work? Have you met your obligations? Have you done what was expected of you, not what you wished you'd done, not what you meant to do, but what you actually, finally, completely accomplished? The inspection is coming. Tonight, tomorrow, eventually. And Perchta is never satisfied with good intentions. So finish your work, whatever it is, whatever form it takes in your modern life. The deadlines haven't gone away. The standards haven't disappeared. The principle that work must be completed and laziness has costs. That's still true, even if no one slits bellies anymore. She's watching. The woman in white, the hag with the iron nose. She's always watching, and she's always checking. Until next time.